I didn't know. They didn't mean it literally. Y'all don't know how fortunate you are to have such fab music every Sunday. And I said it so many times in announcements. Stevie is in Phoenix. She's having a great time. And next time I think I need her to come and talk because you'd much rather see her. Well, good morning, and it's great to be back to the garden. Those of you who've been coming to the garden for the past 5 or 6 years know a little bit of my health issues. And a quick summary for those who aren't familiar, I was diagnosed with 2 terminal forms of leukemia in 07 and 09, and went up to Purdue to kind of finish things out and teach. And I applied to grad school, got my master's, and really didn't expect to finish my PhD. But thanks to your prayers, medical research, I'm one of the lucky ones. January 24th, 2013, I was told that I had won my battle with leukemia. So, thank you. I'm one of the lucky ones. The doctor was somewhat surprised at what I had to say. I said, crap, that means I got to pay my student loans and medical bills. I wasn't planning on that. But I'd like to thank you all, and I'm truly one of the lucky ones. And thank you, and because of you, I will be defending my dissertation in August. And thank you. I still say if you're going to call me doctor then, you should call me master now, right? She doesn't want to do that either. I can't get it. I don't get it. Well, anyway, when Beth called and asked what I was going to talk about, I said, I really don't know. And she said, well, what are you passionate about? And my response was teaching the importance of the people side of business to my students. And in a broad stroke, that is my dissertation. And that's knowing and understanding the people that you work with. This is done through a very conscious effort of listening and really hearing, as well as observing subtle cues from body language. This is not just limited to business. We interact with people in so many different environments through boards, committees, school, work, and personal life. It all applies. When we take the time to get to know someone and get to know the people around us, we start to understand. And I heard that Linda spoke on empathy a couple weeks ago. We may cross paths slightly, but that's not where I'm going. What we'll discuss today is being more aware and therefore being more informed. With information being knowledge, this affords us the ability to work and interact with others on a personal level, the ability to connect. Now, unfortunately, this seems to be a diminishing skill. If I might digress, in the liberal arts building at Purdue, there's a poster, more than one, that says this, and I'm not kidding. Don't break up with a text message. Speak to them face to face. Really? So here we go to interpersonal communication 101, okay? All right, so let's start at the very beginning. We approach someone on an introduction and we're shaking hands. At that moment, we are assessing them and they're assessing us. So I ask this question when I'm interviewing people for a hire. I ask them that. When you're being introduced to someone, how do you assess them? So I ask you, how would you answer that question? Do you look at their clothes, their hair, their gender, nationality, age, race, and then do you slot them in a stereotype? I mean, we all do this to some varying degrees, but I would submit that we should look at their eyes and notice their hands. Are their hands calloused? Do they appear to be closed off? Or are they relaxed? Or are they tense? By paying attention to all of this and more, we can begin to sense who they are as a person. Because really, when you get down to it, that's who we're dealing with. We're dealing with a person. I have tried to consciously study and read people for who they are. And this will affect the approach of how I approach them and how I speak. And again, this is not just for work. This is in life also. But no matter how hard we work at this initial assessment, we're often wrong, or sometimes we can be wrong. My first semester of teaching, I had a student that I read as being extremely arrogant and aloof. I mean, his facial expressions, his body language, they just screamed this. But over his time at Purdue, I got to know him. And was I ever wrong? He turned out to be one of my favorite students, and we've since become friends, and I had the privilege of attending his wedding in December. How did I learn why I was so wrong with Nate? I listened and watched when we spoke, and I got to understand and see him as a person. And by listening and making that connection as a person, you can discard some of your initial assessments. Indian philosopher, writer, and teacher Jiddu Krishnamurti, close, all right, I'm getting better, said, so when you are listening to somebody completely, attentively, then you are listening not only to the words, but also to the feeling of what is being conveyed, to the whole of it, not part of it. This is so important, yet so many of us, and me included, have such a hard time at this. The whole of it. When Mr. Krishnamurti is using talk about the whole of it, he uses the phrase, then you are listening not only to the words. There's so much to listening and really being attentive that we need to be conscious of all aspects. I've developed 4 rules to listening, and I talk a little bit at school about them, and I believe that they address what he means by the phrase, listening not only to the words. And my rules are, number 1, listen to what is said, how it's said, what's not said, and how it's not said. Now, if you think about this really is listening to the whole. For example, my fiancée Anita and I were having a discussion, we'll call it. And at one point she just said, fine. Okay, so reaching back on my expertise in listening and the thought process of the whole and grabbing my 4 rules and deducing, I came up with, okay, rule number 1, listen to what's said, fine, positive word, short, simple. How it's said, fine. Okay. Rule number 3, what is not said, we both know I'm right, so you just need to shut up. So it was one of those rare occasions I just went back to my book and stayed out of trouble. Anyway, but I would guess all of us have had an experience very similar to that. And what's awesome about it is a great example of the different aspects of listening and paying attention. Through that, we can determine what a person is truly saying. Plus, they also notice that we're listening and attentive, and that says something about who we are as a person. And it also tells the other person about how we value them. The whole, as it applies, is to something that's said, which refers also to tone and body language. And at a very young age, we learn to discern that tones can change the meaning of words. I mean, think about when your mother would call you. There were times you knew you were in trouble, and she may say the same words that when you weren't. And by listening to the tone, we can learn what's important to a person and what their hot buttons are and what they like and dislike. And along with the tone of voice comes body language. There's been a myriad of articles and research done on body language, and most studies show that 55 to 65% of body language, communication is through body language. And I would guess most of us are aware of the normal signs, and that's not where I want to go. I would like to get into the more subtle changes, the eyes and the facial expressions. And that's where we really start to learn about somebody. I just ended my term as president of an organization in Lafayette, and during my tenure, we brought on a new treasurer. And when I first met this gentleman, he seemed very stern, very detail-oriented, and pretty dry. But yet there was something in his eyes that seemed a little different. And so I asked, we were going to be working close together. I said, why don't we grab a drink, talk, and get to know each other, break the ice. And while we're talking, he brings up his wife. His entire being changed. His posture changed. His eyes lit up his entire face. And then later he talked about his kids. And the same situation happened. Those two instances in just seconds told me more about Dick than the whole hour and a half we spoke. And then later on, we got to a topic that he was pretty passionate about. His eyes got set, his face was a little firmer. Again, he kind of stiffened up a little more. And so I learned what was really important. And from that, I could deduce other stuff. So in that conversation, I have been able to set a baseline and get to know this man I just really sat down with for the past hour and a half. And I can see how he is when during normal conversation and also on specific topics that he's passionate about. And with this information, it's the change that you notice, and that's the key. And it may indicate something positive or something negative. When I was a project manager back in the real world out of academia in Raleigh, there was a carpenter that worked for us, and one day he just didn't seem himself, and I asked if everything was okay. He said the storm the night before had knocked a tree on their car. And from talking with him before, I knew that he had 3 small children at home. And I said, why don't you take the rest of the day off, and we'll pick it up, don't worry about it, and just get your stuff squared away. Having spoke with him before, I learned who he was as a person, and I was able to treat him as a person. And after that instance, he started working harder for us. His whole attitude changed. He was thinking more towards the project, and we ended up promoting him to a foreman. And later, he told me that he was really surprised that I even noticed, and even more shocked that I was so kind and nice. That's when I learned that the guys in the field thought I was a hard, you know the other word. I guess I always walked around a job site with this firm expression on my face, and I was very direct when I spoke. They thought I was some kind of drill sergeant. I laughed and just said, well, that's the stress. I never knew. But the last I spoke with Scott, he's now a superintendent, and he gave me the most wonderful compliment. He said he looks to see if people are out of sorts, and if they are, he tries to treat them the same way I treated him. So by taking the time to learn of others and trying to understand them, we also learn about ourselves. And I encourage us all to listen completely and attentively to the whole of it. You never know who you might find.